Homelander is by far one of the worst superheroes that Vought from The Boys has to offer. But just how terrible is he? Welcome back, Nerd Squad. In order to find out just how awful Homelander truly is, we thought we'd take a closer look at some of the most atrocious, most heinous acts he has ever committed, in the comics and in the Amazon Prime streaming service show. We'll be counting down the top 10 worst things Homelander has done, and you'll need to stick around for that top spot because it is crazy. It's a doozy. Alright, let's get counting. I mean, the whole list is a doozy, really, let's be real. You need to stay around for all of this. It's gonna be pretty nuts. Number 10. Lied. Now, this isn't always entirely Homelander's fault in the streaming series, except for when, you know, it is. Homelander makes a lot of public speeches in the show, and in almost every single one, he's trying to sway the public to be on his and Vought's side, and as such is lying through his teeth. Now, Vought is also equally responsible for doing this, of course. Both Madeline Stillwell and Seth Edgar, as well as all of Vought as a company, are just as responsible for lying en masse to the public and keeping secrets. So at least Homelander isn't alone in this terrible thing, but then again, sometimes his lies make things even worse, not just for the company, but for innocent people. These lies also aren't always just bad because the public has eaten them up, but Homelander also has a habit of lying and reading the room so poorly at times that he actually gets himself in trouble with his own words and actions. In fact, making the public angry with him and risking him exploding at them. It's very tense to watch sometimes. Like that moment in season 2 where we see Homelander contemplate kind of throwing his entire reputation out the window. He's like, I could listen to you or I could kill everyone. What should I do? Number 9. Expressed himself. At the end of season 2 of The Boys Amazon Prime show, we're treated to a scene that apparently was actually meant for season 1, but ended up on the cutting room floor for that season. Thankfully, we got it in season 2. Woohoo! It shows Homelander taking some me time. He stands on the roof of what appears to be Vought Tower looking down at the night-lit city, as he treats himself to some very intimate me time. He grunts out, I can do whatever the fuck I want. And then we see that he is pantless, and it is implied that he expressed himself all over the city. You know, sometimes you just need to express yourself, but you know, ideally not all over the city. Very rude. Now, before we move on to this next point, if you're enjoying this video, be sure to show us by giving this video a like and smashing that subscribe button if you haven't already. It truly does help us out, and thank you so much for all of your support. Number 8. Queen Maeve. The whole relationship that Homelander has with Queen Maeve is pretty messed up. And this goes for both the show and the comics. In the comics, the two are in a relationship that is intensely one-sided. Maeve is actually in love with Homelander, but he doesn't really care at all about her. At one point, he tricks her into sleeping with Black Noir, which is a huge part of the reason that Maeve herself becomes so callous and cold-hearted. In the show, he terrifies her to the point that she feels it is unsafe to share her relationship with Elena. Homelander is extremely controlling, which almost always leaves Maeve feeling too terrified to ever stand up to him in the Amazon Prime series. Almost anyways. Number 7. Ryan. Not only does Homelander come in and try to basically hijack his son, Ryan, for himself, attempting to steal him away from Becca and make him come over to his side of thinking in season 2 of The Boys, but he also pressures his son to be more like him, to the point that he pushes him off of a roof to prove to Ryan that he does in fact have superpowers like his old man. He encourages Ryan to take that leap of faith, ensuring him that if he jumps off, he'll fly. At this point, Homelander doesn't really know for sure that Ryan even has superpowers, as they have yet to manifest, and yet he still pushes Ryan off the roof, hoping to unlock his son's potential. Yeah, he just pushes him off the roof. Ryan, of course, just falls. He does not fly. Fortunately, he is super durable, and we later learn, yes, he does have powers, so he ends up being okay. But what would Homelander have done if he killed his son? If he didn't end up having superpowers? Probably just fly away and not even dwell on it. Ryan probably wouldn't be worthy of being his son if he hadn't demonstrated his heat vision powers later on. He'd be like, I don't really care, he didn't even have powers. Number 6. Makeout session. In season 2, Homelander finds himself with a new superhero girlfriend. The two of them both seem to see all the other criminals and even just regular humans the same, as nothing more than pestilent ants. They both have no value for human life, and during a makeout session that starts when they are both apprehending a criminal, crush said criminal's head with sheer force in the heat of the moment. Ew. Then they make out in it, and I'm like, ah! So gross. Number 5. Stormfront. Speaking of Homelander's lucky lady, his girlfriend was actually Stormfront. In the comics, Stormfront is the leader of a different group of supes, sort of the B-listers to the Seven's A-listers. Stormfront's also a man, and also a former World War II German soldier, who still patiently worships his former leader, Hitler, as though one day he'll somehow return to power. In the show, Stormfront is quite similar to her comic book counterpart, but she uses social media as a mask and as a means of propaganda to gain support, hoping to amass an army she can utilize for her true, much more sinister purpose. Also, she's a woman, so there's that. Homelander doesn't just date her, but he actually stands by her side after learning of her truly alarming origin. Even knowing who she is and what she believes in, he introduces her to his son and fights at her side. Yikes. Although at least he's a little bit like, I feel a little weird about it. Even for me, this is a lot. Number 4. Flight 37. The tragedy of this flight is one that could have easily been prevented in most comic books. But when it comes to the world of the Amazon Prime series The Boys, things don't end up as happily for those aboard Flight 37. This fate of the crew and passengers ends up being a crash landing and death into the ocean. Well, actually, is it into the ocean? No, I actually think they land on land, but they're flying over the ocean. The fate of the crew and passengers ends up being a crash landing and complete death. Homelander and Queen Maeve arrive in time to stop the terrorists aboard the plane, but the pilots are killed before they can ensure their safety, which prompts Homelander to abandon ship, or in this case, abandon plane. Especially as I'm pretty sure he lasered the actual controls, which is not helpful with his heat vision. It's not good, Homelander, just you need to contain that. Homelander then abandons the plane with no parachute required because he can fly. Queen Maeve insists that they stay and try to help whomever they can, carrying them out. But instead, Homelander pressures Maeve into actually abandoning the plane with him, insisting if they only save a few, then the mission would be considered a failure and a great tragedy. Instead, he orders Maeve to leave with him and tell the press that they actually didn't get there in time to help push for support for a bill that would get supes in with the government and military, which they claim would, help increase their response times. It wouldn't, because they got there in time, they just didn't care. Number 3. Supervillains. Let's not forget that Homelander was also basically the mastermind behind creating super terrorists in the season 1 of the Amazon Prime show, which is pretty terrible. He was the one responsible for leaking Compound V and putting it in the hands of those he knew would want to strike back at the USA. Doing so caused a mass amount of death and destruction, but gave the Vought supes an even greater excuse for needing to exist and gave them more justification in their campaign towards a bigger position of power when it came to the government. Not only was he attempting to help Vought, a pretty evil corporation, but he also made a big mess of it. He also would not let the term supervillain go, no matter what various focus groups thought of it, in comparison to super terrorist, which Ashley said actually rated much better. But that's how petty he is. He's like, no, it's gotta be supervillains. Number 2. The Vice President. In the comics, Homelander at one point gets together a group of supers who take on the government. When they arrive there, Homelander heads to the White House and kills the Vice President of the United States, Victor E. Newman. You might recognize that name if you're watching the show, who was in the comics the former CEO of Vought. He kills him by decapitating him. He also then defiles his decapitated head. Why does he do this? Mostly because he wanted to prove a point and, well, just because he wanted to. That's one of the things that makes Homelander so awful. He just feels entitled to do whatever the heck he wants because he's so powerful, which makes him pretty much one of the worst supes in the comics, if not the absolute worst. I think in the comics, Homelander is the absolute worst. Number 1. His biggest fans. With Flight 37, at least you could try to argue that Homelander felt it wasn't worth saving anyone because, he felt he couldn't save them all. Although it could be argued that he probably could have saved them all by just carrying the plane to safety, which is what some other comic book heroes from Marvel or DC would likely have done. But let's try to just give him the benefit of the doubt for that one and somehow say it was impossible for him to save all of them. If that is the case, then this instance is much worse, because he killed these people intentionally and for no real greater reason other than he just wanted to. At the Believe Expo, Homelander's biggest fans are a family who managed to win a car as well as dinner with Homelander. Homelander decides to fly them around in the car, effortlessly holding it up as he soars through the sky. The family eventually is freezing and is terrified, but tries to pretend, like everything's fine, this is good, we're with our favorite superhero. Homelander is just flying them to dinner, they think, and will be there soon, but Homelander reveals that he doesn't care about the Believe Expo, or the family, or their religion, and that basically this whole thing is a sham. He tells them what he thinks of their beliefs and goes on to say, you may as well have burned your money in regards to the expo costs. And in regards to God, goes on to say, the only man in the sky is me, before letting go of the car and letting it plummet back to Earth and the family to their doom. To Homelander, that would not be a plane, that would be him in the sky. Apparently, since he's the only one. Thank you so much for watching, Nerd Squad. What are some of your favorite The Boys moments? Are you a fan of the comic series, the Amazon Prime live action show, or both? What do you think are some of the worst things Homelander has ever done? Let us know in the comments below. It's a really long list. Honestly, I could probably do 3 more parts to this video. And speaking of comments, it is time to turn to some comments from one of our latest videos, Top 10 Most Powerful Spider-Man Villains. Sunstar comments, I'm in agreement that Moreland and the Inheritors deserve a spot on the list. It basically forces a Spider-Verse team up to deal with the threat posed. Yeah, it's so true, and I think a lot of people just don't like Moreland and the Inheritors because they're like vampires, they're like weird energy vampires from alternate dimension, but they are powerful and they do deserve that spot, so thank you. Anion Hero suggests Kane should be on this list. He has all of Spider-Man's powers at an augmented level. When Kane is actually acting as a foil to Spider-Man as opposed to, just a moody ally, you are definitely not wrong. I actually always love having more Kane on lists, so maybe we'll see him potentially on a part 2. There's just too many good Spider-Man villains who deserve a spot, so we definitely need to talk about more of them, I think. And that's all the time we have for comments today. Be sure to comment below for a chance to have your thoughts and feels shouted out in a future video. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight, reminding you, as always, to stay nerdy, YouTube.